Okay, so welcome everyone to part two of this beautiful book of Hebrews studies. Today, like I mentioned last week, we're going to be covering chapters 4 through 6, and we're going to literally dive into each chapter because there is so much bread in these precepts. It's unbelievable. It connects throughout from beginning to end, and this is what we're called to do, right? So I'm gonna take my time. Um, Obviously, I'm recording. If I'm going too fast, you can always go back and watch the replay, but I do suggest take notes, um, do screenshots if you can, because it's gonna be a lot of meat and information to digest and connect together so that we can connect together. So having said that, just wanted to give a brief, I'm not going to go over every single time with the beginning. Why? Because you're going to see that throughout the book of Hebrews, every chapter connects itself with the beginning and then with the end. So even within Hebrews, you're going to have correlating precepts that go back to the beginning first chapters, for example, or to the later chapters that we're not going to cover tonight. But we'll make some connections already because once we get to the latter chapters, then it'll make more sense. So, having said that, we're going to go ahead and continue on the promise of rest, which we start on chapter 4. And and again, you're going to see that it starts immediately with an adverb, which is a transitional word, meaning that it connects, like I had mentioned in the previous study. It's one long letter that doesn't have breaks, but because we have this letter put into the Bible, it's been broken down by parts for us. But we know it's just a long letter. There's no break in there. Therefore, the promise of rest was linking with the previous chapter, which we're gonna make a note of off the bat once we read it. But let's go ahead and read. Sylvie, you had offered to read, so you can go ahead and read, and then I'll just go back and break down, like we did last week, every single precept. Sylvie?
Sorry, I was on mute.
Okay.
Let me move this out of the way. Okay. Therefore, since a promise remains of entering his rest, let us fear lest any of you seem to have come short of it. For indeed, the gospel was preached to us as well as to them. But the word which they heard did not profit them, not being mixed with faith in those who heard it. For we who have believed do enter the rest, as he said, so I swore in my wrath, they should not enter my rest, although the works were finished from the foundation of the world. For he has spoken in certain place of the seventh day in this way. And Elohim rested on the seventh day from all his works. And again, in this place, they should not enter my rest. Since therefore it remains that some must enter it, and those to whom it was first preached did not enter because of disobedience, again, he designates a certain day, saying, in David, today, after such a long time as it had been said, today, if you will hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. For if Joshua had given them rest, then he would not afterward have spoken of another day. There remains therefore a rest for the people of Elohim, for he who has entered his rest has himself also ceased from his work as Elohim did from his. Let us therefore be diligent to enter that rest, Let anyone fall according to the same example of disobedience. For the word of Elohim is living and powerful, and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to the division of soul and spirit, and of joints and marrow, and is a discerner of the thoughts and intents of the heart. And there is no creature hidden from his sight, but all things are naked and open to the eyes of him to whom we must give account. Seeing then that we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Messiah, the Son of Elohim, let us hold fast our confession. For we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weakness, but was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore come boldly to the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and find grace to help in times of need.
Amen. I love chapter 4 of Hebrews. It's all about the promise of our Mashiach. If anyone can write something really quick. Oh, never mind. I found the chat. Just want to make sure I don't miss out on anything like last week. So yes, Jessica said this is literally so clear that Shabbat is still here today. Absolutely. And we're going to break that down with so many connections. So it's about to get real juicy. Real juicy. For those, like we were saying last week, I believe after the recording had ended, we were talking about many believe that the Sabbath rest is no longer applicable to us because now we rest in Messiah. We do know that Messiah obviously is our rest. However, the rest spoken of in scriptures is foreshadowing of the millennial reign. Clearly, we're not even there yet. So therefore, we continue to obey everything that he commanded us to obey, given specifically that is a foreshadow of what we are to partake in. And not only that, what is the only commandment within the Ten Commandments that is attached to the word remember? Before he even stated what it was, he said, remember the Sabbath day to keep it set apart. He knew people would forget, right? So let's go precept upon precept. So we have, off the bat, we have verse 1, therefore, since a promise remains of entering his rest, let us fear lest any of you seem to have come short of it. Okay, that right there is connecting to the previous Bible verse that we read last week on chapter 3, verses 16 through 17. Let me move this. And it reads, for who having heard rebelled? Indeed, was it not all who came out of Egypt led by Moses? Now with whom was he angry 40 years? Was it not with those who sinned, whose corpses fell in the wilderness? So right there we see that connection with the very first precept, that let us fear lest any of you seem to have come short of it. And exactly how did they come short of it? Exactly how he had mentioned on verses 16 through 17. They obviously rebelled. We read about what happened in Meribah and Massa in the wilderness, and clearly they sinned and perished in the wilderness and were not able to enter into the promised land, which is a foreshadow of the millennial reign. So verse 2, we see, for indeed the gospel was preached to us well as to them. But the word which they heard did not profit them, not being mixed with faith in those who heard it. So right there, what do you guys notice? Because to me, it was very clear that the gospel was preached to us as well. To them is not talking about us. This is the author speaking of their times, which they didn't even have the New Testament written in place yet. So when he was speaking about the gospel being preached to them, meaning the author plus the people who he was addressing the letter to, he was speaking about the Tanakh. He was speaking about the Old Testament. If you look into the Strong's Concordance for the word gospel, let me see if I put it down here. You're going to see that it is they put it in a phrase, preach the gospel, and it's the Strong's in the Greek G2097. I do not know how to pronounce that, but it's basically like in Spanish, evangelismo. And it literally means to bring good news, to announce good tidings. If you want to see even further connections, I have it right here for you guys. You're going to see that it specifically says that it's used in the Old Testament of any kind of good news. So we know that the gospel is not just in the New Testament, it is confirmed by this Greek evangelismo or whatever, that what this is making reference to is about the glad tidings or the good news, used both in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, because clearly the gospel is about the good news announcing Messiah. I want to read something really quick. Karina just said, I see Deuteronomy, those who sinned then and did not make it, compared to his elect who will make it to the New Jerusalem. Almost like these chapters in Hebrews being Deuteronomy, but in the spiritual. My goodness, yes, absolutely. And speaking of Deuteronomy, you're in the Ruach. This is the next connecting precept that I'm going to read. It's found in Deuteronomy chapter 12, verses 7 through 10. And this is connecting with this verse that we read right here on verse 2. So it reads, and there you shall eat eat before the Adon, your Elohim, and you shall rejoice in all to which you have put your hand, you and your households, in which the Adon, your Elohim, has blessed you. You shall not at all do as we are doing here today, meaning they were still in the wilderness in the book of Deuteronomy, right? Every man doing whatever is right in his own eyes. Verse 9, for as yet you have not come to the rest and the inheritance which the Adon your Elohim is giving you, but when you cross over the Jordan and dwell in the land which the Adon your Elohim is giving you to inherit, and he gives you rest from all your enemies round about, so that you dwell in safety. So that goes perfectly with what you had just said, Karina. It is basically a foreshadow. Everything in the book of Deuteronomy was in the physical aspect of them entering into the physical promised land, which was found in the land of Canaan, right? Us today, we are waiting to enter the promised land, which I believe is also in the spiritual land of Canaan, and which is the New Jerusalem. Clearly, because Canaan ended up being Jerusalem. So what was shall be, and there is nothing new under the sun. I'm gonna read some of your precepts after. Let me just continue, because I do want to cover at least the beginning of this chapter so we don't get confused. So let's continue on verse 3. For we who have believed do enter that rest. So notice right there, we who have believed do enter that rest. As he had said, so I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest, although the works were finished from the foundation of the world. And this is quoting directly from Psalms 95, verse 11. So I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest. And we read that last portion, so I only put that little precept there because we read more thoroughly from that chapter last week. But basically, by the way, Hebrews does a lot of that. They go over the same exact precepts in the book of Psalms over and over and over. So we're going to have a lot of repetition, which is great because repetition is key in order for us to understand a matter. So again, for we who have believed do enter that rest. A person, and I believe I said it last time, that a person that does not believe cannot obey. It's funny because I was in a meeting yesterday from our homeschool community, like those are direct the students and whatnot. And in those meetings, obviously they always bring scriptures and whatnot. I'm not gonna lie, it was a little bit painful on my end. You know, I was just listening because I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna just start speaking, contradicting everything everyone's speaking of. They were reading a portion of the book of Romans, and you know how that goes, Paul's letters, right? So it's incredible how, they kept going back, how the law, um, you know, I don't want to get into too many details, but basically stating that the law happened after Moses, and there's a portion, I believe it was the chapter 4 of Romans, that was speaking of Abraham and how Abraham believed and it was counted to him as righteousness, which we're gonna get into that, by the way, later on in chapter 11 of this book. But what I'm trying to say is that Paul was speaking of how about circumcision and the uncircumcision, and how he believed even before, basically, Ishmael was even born, and it was counted to him as righteousness. But then it's like they're missing the whole point, that in order for him to actually act, he needed to believe first, which is why it was counted to him as righteousness. You feel me? Because of the fact that he believed, he was able to later circumcise his firstborn, circumcise his other firstborn, which obviously Isaac later ends up being the firstborn, but you get what I'm saying. And not only that, but ends up almost sacrificing him because of the fact that he believed. But the whole point is that I'm trying to convey is that in order to enter that rest, we must believe, because if you don't believe, you're not going to do the works. And if you do the works without believing, then that's just being like the Pharisees. So you need both, as James states. And so we also have, let me just read these 3 Bible verses so I can make more connections. For he has spoken in a certain place of the 7th day in this way, and the Most High rested on the 7th day from all his works. By the way, notice how he's making a connection with Genesis, speaking about the Sabbath day, which obviously took place from the very beginning of creation. And it is to me very clear that this is speaking about a Sabbath rest, which I'm going to confirm it furthermore. But off the bat right there, this is not just talking about any spiritual rest. This is specifically talking about the rest on the 7th day, which is the Shabbat. And again, in this place, they shall not enter my rest. Since therefore it remains that some must enter it, and those to whom it was first preached did not enter because, again, of disobedience. Again, because obedience is key. Yes, you must believe, but you must also obey. What are you going to do with just believing if you don't obey? Abraham believed, but he obeyed. And as a matter of fact, in the book of Genesis, I want to say that it's chapter either 22, it's in the 20s, where it states that, and if anyone can look it up, because I didn't put it, it states that he was basically righteous because he obeyed everything in the law. So the law was from the beginning. The law was from the very beginning. It was just not in written form until Moses came to play, where it was obviously handwritten to them so that they can have this guide, because now they are about to enter this a promised land. But again, this is the connections right here. It's speaking of a foreshadowing of the millennial reign, which is the Sabbath day, which is the 7th day, the 7,000 year. It all connects. And it is speaking about the connection with being obedient. So precepts that they're quoting in those 3 verses I just went over. First one is Genesis 2, 1 through 3. Thus the heavens and the earth and all the host of them were finished. And on the 7th day, the Most High ended his work, which he had done. And he rested on the 7th day from all his work which he had done. Then the Most High blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which the Most High had created and made. It belongs to him. It is his day of rest that he grants to us, those who are obedient, right? Exodus 20, verse 11, for in 6 days the Most High made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Therefore, the Most High blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. And by the way, this is in the portion where he's already going over the 10 commandments. And then we have Exodus 31, verse 17. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. For in 6 days the Adon made the heavens and the earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed. And again, it is a sign. We know that the Sabbath day is a mark, a literal sign between him and the children of Israel, which is his people, his church, the bride, and again, forever. This is covenant language right here. And so we go back to what is the author of Hebrews trying to state, because he's talking about obedience. He's talking about make sure that you don't go back to the things that they did in the wilderness, right? And so because they were also, the gospel was also preached to them, and they did not hear it, meaning it did not profit them. So in other words, don't do that. Don't do what they did, because if you have believed, you will enter my rest. And then that rest has been connected with the Sabbath day rest. In the in the translation, I believe it's the ESV translation. Let me see if I wrote it down here in my notes. Verse 8, or is it verse 11? We're going to get there now. But verse 11 literally renders Sabbath rest in a different translation. But I just want to go ahead and say that already before I forget. Obviously, we're going to break it down more. So then we have verse 8. Actually, verse 7. I skipped it. Again, he designates a certain day, saying in David, today, after such a long time, as it has been said, today, if a condition, right? If you will hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. And again, this is being quoted. I know we've been reading it over and over, but again, this is found in Psalms 95, verses 7 through 8. For he is our Elohim, and we are the people of his pasture. Meaning, this is talking about Messiah, because Messiah is the shepherd, right? And the sheep of his hand. Today, if you will hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion, as in the day of trial in the wilderness. We spoke about this last week, but again, the author is making a note of it again and again. It's almost like he wants to emphasize the point. Guys, please don't do what they did. If not, you will die in this wilderness. And again, what Karina had said before, I believe the book of Hebrews is so important for us today, because we are living in the spiritual wilderness in our day and age. And this is so relatable, all of it, all of it. Then we have verse 8, for if Joshua had given them rest, then he would not afterward have spoken of another day. And I want to speak a little bit about this, because I know a lot of people will say that Messiah's name is literally Joshua, which is Jehoshua in Hebrew. I'm not going to enter into a name debate or whatnot, but I am going to point out why I do not like to credit that name to our Messiah. Yes, there's a lot of foreshadows between Joshua and Messiah. Absolutely. The same way there's a lot of, like we saw last week, between Moses and Messiah, between Joseph and Messiah, between Abraham and Messiah, between Isaac and, you get me? Like all the righteous men in scripture, specifically the forefathers, are very foreshadowing, all of them, in terms of Messiah. So we cannot, pick, because Joshua was the one who actually led the people into the promised land, conclude, therefore, that this is Messiah's actual name. I do see the connections. I don't take it lightly. I do see the connections with Joshua being the branch in the books of the prophets, such as Jeremiah, and I believe it's also stated in Zechariah, if I'm not mistaken. There is many connections between Joshua being like the branch, right? The same as Messiah. Again, there's connections throughout all scriptures with other righteous men. Now, why don't I believe, because he's the one that led the people to the promised land, that would be his name? Because in the book of Hebrews, we see a clear distinction that, yes, he led those people into that promised land. However, even though he gave them rest, he still afterward have spoken of another day. So in essence, he wasn't in the official promised land. This was just a foreshadowing. And again, verse 9 confirms this. There remains, therefore, a rest for the people of Alahim. And let's look at this correlating precepts here in regards to Joshua, what they're speaking of here. And that is found in Joshua 22, verses 2 to 4. And said to them, you have, meaning Joshua, you have kept all that Moses, the servant of the Most High, commanded you, and have obeyed my voice in all that I commanded you. You have not left your brethren these many days, up to this day, but you have kept the charge of the commandment of the Most High, your Elohim. And now the Most High, your Elohim, has given rest to your brethren as he promised them. Now therefore return and go to your tents, to the land of your possession, which Moses, the servant of the Most High, gave you on the other side of the Jordan. So that's obviously when he's speaking of this rest, this is what the author is quoting from. However, we know that if we keep reading the book, and even going into Judges, we see that even though they entered the promised land and they did have rest, they technically didn't have rest because they still had to conquer many cities within the land that were filled with giants. So that's another whole other topic of study. That's the book of all of it in the book of Judges. But in essence, it's confirming again that Joshua was just foreshadowing this rest, which is what is saying here on verse 8. Then we have verse 9 where it says, there remains therefore a rest for the people of the Most High. I have Acts chapter 7, verses 44 through 46. Our fathers had the tabernacle of witness. And again, this is Stephen before he was stoned. Our fathers had the tabernacle of witness in the wilderness, as he appointed, instructing Moses to make it according to the pattern that he had seen, which our fathers, having received it in turn, also brought with Joshua into the land possessed by the Gentiles, whom the Most High drove out before the face of our fathers until the days of David, who found favor before the Most High and asked to find a dwelling for the God of Jacob. And then we have verse 10, for he who has entered his rest has himself also ceased from his works as the Most High did from his. And then we see here, let me see if this is precept. I don't have a precept for that one. It's for 11. So let me continue. Let me just quickly look at the chat. Yes, Karina, it says, and the Sabbath is literally what the Most High kept telling them to do, but they kept forsaking it. Yep. And do you remember the consequence of those who broke the Sabbath? It wasn't a good one. They were more than cut off, right? And then Stephanie says, almost like the law was written on his heart. I believe he's talking about, you were talking about Joshua there. Sorry, I just read this. Sorry, sometimes I go back to read, but then it's like,
I think she was talking about when we were talking about Abraham and believing and following.
oh, okay, yes. Yes, the law was written on his heart. Oh my God, yes, that makes sense. Now it makes sense. I'm like, what was she saying? Perfect, absolutely. Abraham is a perfect example of that because it wasn't written in stone yet, and he believed, and he did. He surely did, because he was about to take his own son's life out of obedience, pure obedience. That's why I was low-key having a really hard time in last night's meeting. It was very painful, but anyway, let's continue. So we have verse 11. Okay. So this is the part. Let us therefore be diligent to enter that rest. And this is the part that speaks of the Shabbat rest. Lest anyone fall according to the same example of disobedience. Like we've been talking about, the same example of disobedience that we saw in the wilderness, that restated in chapter 3 of Hebrews, and again being reminded again and again throughout this chapter. Now, let's look into that rest just to confirm that it is indeed speaking of a Sabbath. We have the Strong's for that word rest from verse, was it verse 12 that we just read? Let me look again. Just want to make sure I'm not saying the wrong thing. Verse 11, sorry. So that word rest, this is the Strong's for that particular rest, which is G4520. in Greek, sabbatismos, which means a keeping a Sabbath. The blessed rest from toils and troubles derives from the word Sabbath day. And I'm going to show you because I actually looked into the word that it derives from. So sabbatismos, which we see it right here, we just spoke about rest, a keeping of a Sabbath, we spoke about that, but it derives from this word right here, G 4521, which is sabbaton, and it literally means the Sabbath day. The Sabbath, it tells you the seventh day of each week, which was a sacred feast or festival on which the Israelites were required to abstain from all work, the institution of the Sabbath, the law for keeping holy every seventh day of the week, a single Sabbath day, 7 days, etc., 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 specifically a Shabbat. So in other words, what is this saying here? Let us therefore be diligent to enter that Sabbath rest. Stephanie said, naming Saturday Sábado in Spanish was so strategic. I know, right? Very strategic and very confusing. I remember seeing a teaching from someone speaking of how the Sabbath day had to be Saturday and no other day because Sabbath in many languages was literally like meant Saturday. Not in English specifically, but like I think in like obviously in Spanish, I think French, if I'm not mistaken, Latin. Like there's so many languages that the Sabbath day literally means the Saturday, and I do believe that was strategically placed there because we know that the Sabbath day is not any specific Gregorian calendar day that the rulers of this world named. Is based on Abba's calendar being led by the sun, the moon, and the stars, his luminaries. Yes, the Vatican, they speak Latin. Yes, Karina. And they actually wrote all the scriptures in Latin originally. That's very interesting to me. But anyway, let's continue. So again, I just wanted to reiterate that this right here renders enter that Sabbath rest. Lest anyone fall according to the same example of disobedience. So this is key. I don't know what else to say in regards to that. We're going to break it down with the threshold covenant in a minute. I told you, I warned you already. We're going to take a minute in chapter 4. So bear with me, okay? Verse 12. Now see the connection because a lot of people will say this precept over and over again and they forget that this connects with verse 11. For the word of the Most High is living and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even to the division of soul and spirit and of joints and marrow, and is a discerner of the thoughts and intents of the heart. And there is no creature hidden from his sight, but all things are naked and open to the eyes of him to whom we must give account. People love to talk about the word of God is living and powerful. Amen. Yes. Come on. And they throw, all these crazy revelations based on that one verse, but they forget that the reason why he's stating that the word of the Most High is living and active is because it's going to discern the thoughts and the intents of your heart. Are you going to be diligent to enter the Sabbath rest? That's what this is saying. That's what this is speaking of. The word of the Most High is powerful, it's sharper than any two-edged sword, so that it can discern the thoughts, again, and the intents of the heart. And it literally connects it, and there is no creature hidden from his sight. You cannot fake that you're keeping his commandments. You cannot fake that you're living in obedience. That's in essence what this is trying to tell you right here. But all things are naked and open to the eyes of him to whom we must give account. And again, do not fall according to the same example of disobedience. What do I get for this? Keep his commandments. Keep the Shabbat. It is there so that you can actually enter the rest. Right now, we're practicing. We're practicing every seventh day, every moed, every moedim. We practice resting in him. We practice stating with our obedience, telling this life that we don't care what's happening outside. We make an action of faith because we believe. And so then we act accordingly. We believe that he is our provider. We believe that nothing else matters outside of him. We believe that his word is truth. We believe that he is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And we believe that everything that was written for our instruction so that we do not perish like they did, right? So, yes, Yasmin, it is a wedding rehearsal. Everything that we're doing right now, we are doing it out of obedience because it's getting us ready for when that actual millennial reign, which is the actual Shabbat that we're going to rest for real, we're practicing for that. It's like the way I see it, any bride getting married, they practice, they get ready for their wedding day. They rarely, I mean, there might be some odd, weird examples out there, right? Or cases, but for the most part, anyone wise would prepare before the wedding day. They would buy the garments, they would take days off to prepare for the wedding. They save money, they look into wherever they want to do their wedding. They look for the vendors, the photographers, you name it. They look for the food even that they want to eat that day. So we are the bride. Are we not to do the same things when it comes to Messiah and the wedding supper of the Lamb? So I just wanted to throw that in there. It is so clear to me that this has to do so much more than just, oh, I rest in Messiah because he is our rest. No, we do it because we believe and we obey and we follow his example, not the disobedient people's example. Yes, even when eloping, there's still preparation. Absolutely. I've done elopements well in my business. So yes, there's still preparation in that. So, I've never met anyone who hasn't prepared, but I can only imagine that someone who didn't prepare and arrived to their wedding, the wedding's going to be a hot mess and you're not going to be ready. Your garments are not going to be ready. So, just saying. Now, let me just, I am going to talk about, in regards to this section right here, about the threshold covenant, but let me just give you the correlating precepts for these last three. And as a matter of fact, I have precepts that correlate with verse 12 as well. So let me just, verse 12, we have Psalms 147, verse 15. He sends out his command to the earth. His word runs very swiftly, speaking about his word being a double-edged sword, right? Isaiah 49:2. And he has made my mouth like a sharp sword. In the shadow of his hand, he has hidden me and made me a polished shaft. In his quiver, he has hidden me. And that correlates beautifully with what we just said, that there is nothing hidden right here from his sight. That's verse 13. We also have Ephesians 6:17. And take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of the Elohim. Revelations 2:12. And to the angel of the church of Pergamos, right? These things say, this thing says, he who has the sharp two-edged sword, meaning Messiah. And then lastly, well, I have two more. John 12:48. He who rejects me and does not receive my words has that which judges him. The word that I have spoken will judge him in the last day. 1 Corinthians 14:24 through 25. But if all prophesy and an unbeliever or an uninformed person comes in, he is convinced by all. He is convicted by all. And thus the secrets of his heart are revealed. And so falling down on his face, he will worship the Most High and report that the Most High is truly among you. And obviously, Paul here is speaking about those who prophesy, right? But we know that when you prophesy, obviously, with the Ruach HaKodesh, with his Holy Spirit, you are prophesying the word of the Adon. So by that prophecy, it's where I was trying to get at that. And thus the secrets of his heart are revealed, which is what the word of the Most High does. It's literally right here, discerner of the thoughts and the intents of the heart. I forgot to read this one in regards to verse 11. 2 Peter 1:10. Therefore, brethren, be more diligent to make your call and election sure. For if you do these things, you will never stumble. And again, that goes with verse 11, where he was saying, let us therefore be diligent to enter that Sabbath rest. Be even more diligent to make your call and election sure. which again has to do with enduring till the end. Be diligent. You're not, like they say, that hyper greasy grace mentality, say once saved, always saved. You don't even know if you're saved until the end. Your obedience will prove it. So let's continue. So now verse 13, I have correlating precepts. Second Chronicles, let me just reread verse 13. And there is no this is a part that no creature is hidden under his side. Second Chronicles 16 verse 9, for the eyes of the Most High run to and fro throughout the whole earth to show himself strong on behalf of those whose heart is loyal to him. In this you have done foolishly. Therefore, from now on you shall have wars. Obviously, this was talking to the king, but the whole point is that the eyes of the Most High go to and fro and seeking to see whose heart is loyal to him. Psalms 33, 13 through 15. The Most High looks from heaven. He sees all the sons of men. From the place of his dwelling, he looks on all the inhabitants of the earth. He fashions their hearts individually. He considers all their works. For that, the people who say, we no longer have to do the works because all we have to do is just believe. Clearly, they have not read this, and they have not read the book of Revelation either, because literally it shows you that the seven churches are being judged by their works. Just stating the fact that the seven churches is a representation of his bride, hence us. Proverbs 15:11. Hell and destruction are before the Most High, so now much more the hearts of the sons of men. Again, the hearts is what's going to lead you to obey or not obey. It's a matter of the heart. Torah, at the end of the day, I believe that's what Stephanie had mentioned before about Abraham. It's a matter of the heart. All right, let me continue. So correlating precepts with verses 14 through 16. Let's do them. Hebrews 2:17. Again, going back to the warnings from the very first, the first two chapters. Therefore, in all things he had to be made like his brethren, that he might be merciful and faithful high priest in things pertaining to the Most High, to make propitiation for the sins of the people. Hebrews 7:26. We haven't read this, but some of these precepts I'm giving you sneak peek, but they correlate with what we're reading right now. For such a high priest was fitting for us, who is holy, harmless, undefiled, separate from sinners, and has become higher than the heavens. Obviously speaking of Messiah. Hebrews 10:23. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And what he promised is the Sabbath rest, the Holy Land, right? The millennial reign, New Jerusalem. Isaiah 53, verses 3 to 5. He is despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we did not esteem him. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by the Most High, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions, which we know, transgressions of the law. He was bruised for our iniquities, which means literally lawlessness. The chastisement for our peace was upon him, and by his stripes we are healed. Luke 22:28. But you are those who have continued with me in my trials. This is speaking, Messiah speaking right here to the disciples, and this is in reference to verse 15 specifically. Let me go back just so you guys don't get confused. Did I say 15? Yes. Where it says, for we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin. That's what this is correlating with. And then 2 Corinthians 5:21, for he made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of the Most High in him. Hebrews 7:26, for such a high priest was fitting for us, who is holy, harmless. I believe I already read that. Ephesians 2:18, that correlates with verse 16. For through him we both have access by one ruach to the Father. And Hebrews 10:19 as well correlates, 19 through 22 correlates with verse 16. Therefore, brethren, having boldness to enter the holiest by the blood of Mashiach, by a new and living way, which he consecrated for us through the veil, that is his flesh. And having a high priest over the house of the Most High, let us draw near with a true heart and full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water. All right. So having showed these connections, I'm going to give you a huge connection with the promise of rest and what it means to enter that rest, and how does that correlate with the threshold covenant that we find in the book of Exodus with the giving of the Passover, the commandment of the Passover, and the blood over the doorpost. And I had posted about this a while back, but now we're doing this study, so it's gonna make it more clear to understand. Okay, so I want to read. I'm gonna break down this verse a little bit more later, but Zechariah 12 has to do with Jerusalem and the foreshadowing of the wars that would come upon her. Well, let's read. Let's read first, and I'll let you know what it is. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about, when they shall be in the siege both against Judah and against Jerusalem. And if you read the whole chapter in context, you're going to find that this is a foreshadowing of actually New Jerusalem. So let's look into this word right here, a cup, which a different translation renders. I believe the ESV renders, let me see if I put it here. Give me 1 second, guys. Gotta move everything around. Okay, so I did not put it up here. However, I do have it. I have it in a different translation. I remember now. I'll go back. The different translation reads, a burdensome stone for all the people. So I wanted to show the two ways that is written, because both ways make so much sense to me. So let's now go back to this translation where it talks about a cup. Both a cup and the burdensome stone, when you look into the Hebrew Strong's Concordance, is the word for that word cup. It's the H5605, and its original sense of containing a vestibule as a limit, also a dish for holding blood or wine, a basin, bowl, cup, door, as in doorpost, which is why the burdensome stone also makes sense. The gate, the post, or in other words, it's also a threshold. So we're gonna break that down. So we know that Messiah said that he is the door. The word door in Hebrew is the word, I don't know how to pronounce that, but I believe it's dalet. And we know that in the modern Hebrew, the way you spell that, it's literally like a little gate, like a little door, right? In the Passover, we know that Moses was commanded for all the people to put blood on the doorposts of their doors, right? So let's continue. I don't want to lose you guys. So something I do want to show you is that in the ancient door entrance, by the way, this is backwards. I don't know if you see the legs over here. I had to put it like that to fit it so you guys could see the whole picture. But basically, that should be a horizontal picture. But I just wanted to see, like, when a person goes through the door, this would be the basin within the threshold. And that's an ancient door entrance. I believe that is the blood, the basin that was found in the book of Exodus 12:7. Remember when they would pull the blood from the basin? And that, I put the wrong Bible verse here. It's not 7. I actually have it here, just so I don't bring confusion. It is verse, I'm going to show you right Because verse 7 is just where it's saying to put blood on the doorpost, right? I believe it's verse 20 something. Let me see. There, verse 22. And you shall take a bunch of hyssop, dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and strike the lintel and the two doorposts with the blood that is in, again, the basin. And none of you shall go out of the door of his house until the morning. So keep that in mind. I know this might sound like a lot, but I'm going to break it down to you guys so you understand how this all connects back to the promise of rest. So understanding that, then I'm going to read just from here. It says that it was customary for agreements to be, again, in ancient Eastern cultures, it was customary for agreements to be made at the entrance to the home. An animal was slaughtered at the door and the blood was sprinkled across the threshold of the door. If the person considering the offer agrees, they would then step carefully over the blood on the threshold and into the home. This signified that the terms of the agreement were accepted and that the person was then in a covenantal agreement with the owner of the home. Keep in mind that Messiah is the door, right? If the person was not in agreement or did not like the terms, they would step in the blood on the threshold and destroy the agreement. This was also done when adopting a new member of the family and in marriage, which is why I put this little picture here. Interestingly, you know that even in our Western culture, when people get married, what is accustomed to do is to carry the bride through the door, right? Entering the door, the groomsman carries the bride and he enters through the door. I don't think at all by coincidence, and I believe that stems from this idea, this ancient practice. So again, reiterating, Messiah said, I am the door. The door is a threshold access. He is the only way to our Abba, our Father, the way into his house where he shuts out our enemies. The entrance of the Hebrew's tent was covered by a curtain suspended from a horizontal pole. I don't have a picture of that here, but just kind of like imagine it. So the picture of the Hebrew letter for Dalet represents the door of the tent. I don't know if you guys can visualize that. So it's the door of a tent, kind of like how we do our sukkahs, right? So let's continue. Any questions up to this point? I don't want to lose you guys. I don't see my messages anymore. So I'm going to continue. So we have that the opposite of the threshold is actually, like I had just read it, when someone tramples over the blood. Again, if the second party didn't want to enter into covenant, the blood was being spilled. The invitation has been sent. If someone didn't want to partake of the covenant, they would step on the blood to show their disregard. So kind of like a mockery, right? So the author of Hebrews, and we're not going to cover fully this chapter tonight, but the author of Hebrews speaks of this on chapter 10, specifically verse 29, where it says, how much more severe do you think the punishment will be for the one who has trampled the Son of Elohim underfoot and has regarded as unholy the blood of the covenant by which he was made holy and has insulted the Spirit of grace? When we get to chapter 10, we're going to break that a little bit better. But just right off the bat, you're going to start seeing the idea of what is it that he's talking about. This is all covenant language. And you might say, how do you know this? How do you know that this is what this was referring to? Well, because he's using the words trampled the Son of Elohim underfoot. And then it talks about and has regarded as unholy the blood of the covenant, which is exactly what the ancient cultures would do when they would break an agreement. Interestingly, when we look into Genesis, when Abraham, which he was still Abram at that point, was still what's it called? When he entered into a covenant with the Most High, this is what took place. It says, and it came to pass that when the sun went down and it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace and a burning lamp that passed between those pieces, meaning the pieces of the animals. I put it in parentheses there for you guys. In the same day, the Adon made a covenant with Abram, saying, unto thy seed have I given this land from the river of Egypt and the great river, the river Euphrates. So we see right there that how the Most High himself passed between the pieces of the sacrifice of the animals, coming into a blood covenant and agreement with Abraham and changing into Abraham after that. So we know that everything about the Most High, it's about covenant. We know that Psalms 24, 7 through 8 says, lift up your heads, O gates. Gates is another word for doors, right? And be lifted up, you everlasting doors, that the King of glory may come in. Who is the King of glory? The Adon, strong and mighty. The Adon, mighty in battle. This is talking about Messiah. Psalms 84, 10. Better is one day in the courts, in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. I would rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my Adon than dwell in the tents of the wicked. And Deuteronomy 11:20, interestingly, commands us to write the mezuzah, which is his word, on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. His word, his commandments, his Torah. He commands us to write it on, again, the doorpost. Get it? On the doorpost, which signifies covenant. So let's continue. So again, this is on the right side, you see this is an illustration of the animals and the blood and how the Most High passed through when he formed covenant with Abraham. And so this is all a covenant language. And how do we know that? Again, when it states, there's a typo here, where it states in Genesis 15:17 through 18, and it came to pass that when the sun went down and it was dark, behold, this is like cutting my words here. Behold, a smoking furnace and a burning lamp that passed between those pieces. In the same day, the Most High made a covenant with Abraham, saying, unto thy seed have I given the land. So again, we know that the Most High told Israel to put blood of a lamb on the doorposts and mantles. This was a sign of a covenant. We are used to seeing a basin as a bowl we hold in our hands. However, in ancient times, the basin, the hole, was built into the threshold of the door. So you could put the blood into the threshold and then put it on the doorpost. So sort of kind of like imagine the blood is on the bottom. You grab a brush or whatever you're going to use, a painting brush, and then you grab the blood from there and paint it around the doorpost, right? Am I losing you guys? Are you guys still here? At times, people who were instituting covenants with one another would identify the best of their animals and then take and kill the animals. They would then cut them in pieces so that there would be the blood seen in order to show that a blood covenant was being made. They would then set the animal pieces on each side, like two rows, like the picture here on the right-hand side. They would then say the covenant with each other, then both walk through the walkway between two rows of dead animals, which is exactly what the Most High did with Abraham. When they were done, they would say to each other, if one of us breaks the covenant we just made with each other, may we be like the animals we just killed. This is very significant to understand because the Most High made an everlasting covenant just like this with Abraham. So the Most High came to Abraham in a dream and showed him a bunch of animals already killed, and the Most High himself passed between the pieces. Now, do you see the picture of covenant that he is trying to show us? So again, this all has to do with the ancient cultures. They practice the exact same thing. Now, understanding this, let's go back to the original precept that I had shared on Zechariah 12, specifically now verse 3. And in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, kind of like the animals. Though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it. Are you guys seeing it now? So applying this understanding to Zechariah 12, this is showing us ancient covenant language to express the heart of the Most High. Those who cross over his threshold, which is Jerusalem, the place of covenant, with evil intent, shall be cut to pieces like animals, as if one broke covenant with another man right after walking through that animal pieces, like the example in Genesis 15. In Jerusalem is If Jerusalem is the threshold of the Most High, where the covenant is made with all nations, then what blood was shed at that threshold to regather us back to his covenant? Obviously, our Messiah should come to a mind. So his blood, right, the Lamb of the Most High, his blood was shed in Jerusalem, which is the threshold of the Most High, so that we can be renewed into his covenant and become Israel once again. So Yasha was not sent to shed his blood so that we can reject the Torah of the Most High. He was sent to shed his blood because we all transgressed the Most High's Torah. We all have sinned, therefore we broke his Torah. And again, how does that relate to the threshold covenant? Israel taking it back to Hebrews 4, Israel in the desert trampled all over the covenant and they did not enter into the promised land. In Hebrews 4, it lists the consequences of continuing in willful sin after we have received knowledge of the truth. So they continue to willfully sin. They continue in disobedience. They received the same gospel as us, meaning the same gospel preached from the beginning of times, but they did not walk it out in faith. So again, it listed the judgment one would receive in trampling on the blood of the covenant and insulting the spirit of grace. So if we do not follow the word of the Most High, we will not enter that still pending 1,000-year rest. And I hope now everything makes sense. And again, this is the other translation I was telling you, Hebrews 4, and I'm specifically now quoting verses 9, 11, and 13. So there remains a Sabbath keeping for the people of Elohim. Let us therefore do our utmost to enter into that rest, lest anyone fall after the same example of disobedience. For the word of Elohim is living and working and sharper than any two-edged sword, cutting through even the dividing of being and spirit, and of joints and marrow, and able to judge the thoughts and intentions of the heart. And there is no creature hidden from his sight, but all are naked and laid bare before the eyes of him with whom is our account. And I can finally see the chat. I see that precept, Revelations 3:20. Yes, the law being written in our hearts, and Revelations 3:20, he knocks on the door of our hearts. Amen. So I hope the little visuals helped you understand what, in essence, chapter 4 as a whole is making reference of, and later we're going to see it a little bit more in chapter 10. So let's continue then. We are now in chapter 5. Oops, what did I do? Give me 1 second. I have to move all these things around, like the chat and everything, because if not, I don't know what I'm doing here. Chapter 5, there it is. If you guys have questions, don't feel embarrassed. There's no silly question. I want to make sure you guys understand. Like, to me, it's super clear. But again, not everybody arrives to this revelation at once, right? Yes, I did tell you, Karina, that we were gonna take our time in chapter 1. I just have correlating precepts for the other chapters, so I don't have as much, so don't worry. But I did want to take my time because I do believe it's important to understand, especially for us, that people are always throwing in like, Messiah is our rest now, not understanding that this has all to do with that covenant that was formed from the very beginning with Abraham. And for us to actually be able to enter into the covenant, we must not trample over it. We must now not belittle what he started, right? And he came to restore. Exactly. It's like we vowed to marry him. I love that, Yasmin. Exactly. All right. I'm glad it was clear. All right. So chapter five. I think, Jess, you had said you were going to read it, right?
Yeah,
Thank you.
okay. For every high priest taken from among men is ordained for men in things pertaining to Haya, that he may offer both gifts and sacrifices for sins. Who can have compassion on the ignorant and on them that are out of the way, for that he himself also is compassed with infirmity. And by reason hereof he ought, as for the people, so also for himself to offer for sins. And no man taketh this honor unto himself, but he that is called to the Most High, as was Aaron. So also Christ glorified not himself to be made on high priest and high priest, but he that said unto him, Thou art my son, today have I begotten thee. As he saith also in another place, Thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek, who in the days of his flesh, when he had offered up prayers and supplications with strong crying and tears unto him that was able to save him from death, and was heard in that he feared. Though he were a son, yet learned he obedience by the things which he suffered. And being made perfect, he became the author of eternal salvation unto all them that obey him, called of the Most High and High Priest after the order of Melchizedek, of whom we have many things to say and hard to be uttered, seeing ye are dull of hearing. For when the time ye ought to be teachers, ye have need that one teach you again, which be the first principles of the oracles of Haya, and are become such as have need of milk and not of strong meat. For every one that useth milk is unskillful in the word of righteousness, for he is a babe. But strong meat belongeth to them that are of full age, even those who by reason to use have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil.
I mean, noticed that it had changed to KJV, so I'm going to bring it back to NKJV because I love more the simplistic version. All right. So we have we go a little bit into Melchizedek connections here. However, we're not going to get into the Melchizedek study in this portion. That will be next Friday. We'll just share a few connecting precepts in regards to that. Now, so we see throughout chapter 5 the connection with the threshold covenant. With the key terms here is obedience. And we see that verse 1, for every high priest taken from among men is appointed for men in things pertaining to the Most High, that he may offer both gifts and sacrifices for sins. We see right here connections with back to Hebrews 2. Therefore, in all things he had to be made like his brethren, that he might be a merciful and faithful high priest in things pertaining to the Most High, to make propitiation for the sins of the people. We already discussed this last week, how he basically became lower than the angels and became like one of us. Hebrews 8, verse 3, for every high priest is appointed to offer both gifts and sacrifices. Therefore, it is necessary that this one also have something to offer. Clearly, because we know that with him becoming like a high priest, right? He had to basically sacrifice himself. Verse 2, where it says he can have compassion on those who are ignorant and going astray, since he himself is also subject to weakness. We have another connection with Hebrews 7, verse 28. For the law appoints as high priests men who have weaknesses or have weakness, but the word of the oath, which came after the law, appoints the Son who has been perfected forever. And again, and this appoint came after the law, is speaking of the Levitical law, because clearly it's speaking about a priesthood. Again, you see it right here, for the law appoints high priests. So this is the type of law that this is making reference of here. So the word of the oath, which came after basically the judicial, my goodness, what am I saying? The Levitical law appoints now the Son has been perfected forever. That is the context right there. We'll obviously break that more down when we speak of that next week. And we also have, let me go back to verse 3. Because of this, he is required, as for the people, so also for himself, to offer sacrifices for sins. And we know this because in Leviticus, specifically, we have 9 verse 7. And Moses said to Aaron, go to the altar and offer your sin offering and your burnt offering, and make atonement for yourself and for the people. Offer the offering of the people and make atonement for them as the Most High commanded. And again, Leviticus 16 verse 6, Aaron shall offer the bull as a sin offering, which is for himself, and make atonement for himself and for his house. And again, we see it in Hebrews 7:27, who does not need daily as those high priests to offer up sacrifices, first for his own sins and then for the people's. For this he did once for all when he offered up himself. And we'll see it also in chapter 9 verse 7. But into the second part, the high priest alone once a year, not without blood, which he offered for himself and for the people's sins committed in ignorance. Okay, so we see right here, verse 4, and no man takes this honor to himself, but he who is called by the Most High, just as Aaron was. Exodus 28 verse 1. Now take Aaron your brother and his sons with him from among the children of Israel, that he may minister to me as a priest. Aaron and Aaron's sons, Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. We know that these two committed some strange worship. We also see Numbers 16 verse 40, to be a memorial to the children of Israel, that no outsider who is not a descendant of Aaron, meaning he's not from the tribe of Levi, should come near to offer incense before the Most High, that he might not become like Korah and his companions, just as the Most High had said to him through Moses. And if you guys remember that portion about Korah did something that he wasn't supposed to. He was not a high priest. And again, we have First Chronicles 23 verse 13, the sons of Amram, Aaron and Moses, and Aaron was set apart, he and his sons forever, that he should sanctify the most holy things, to burn incense before the Most High, to minister to him, and to give the blessing in his name forever. So that basically just confirms that only Aaron and his bloodline had the honor to atone for the people. Yes, Stephanie. Messiah was the offering at the same time. He became the priest as well as the offering. Our Mashiach, our husbandman. So verse 5, so also Messiah did not glorify himself to become high priest, but it was he who said to him, meaning the Father, you are my son, today I have begotten you. We read that last week, but again, that is found in Psalms 2 verse 7. I declare the decree, the Adon has said to me, you are my son, today I have begotten you. So again, it wasn't even Messiah who said, I am the Most High Almighty. The Father declared that to him. Verse 6, as he also says in another place, meaning the Father again, you are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. We're going to get into that next week. But again, that is being quoted from Psalms, very prophetic psalm, by the way, 110 verse 4. The Adon has sworn and will not relent. You are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. I know you might be like, I don't get it. Well, don't worry. Next week, we're going to break down the order of Melchizedek, precept upon precept. But today, we're just connecting precepts. But in essence, what this means is Melchizedek was not from the bloodline of the Levites. As we had read before, only the line of Aaron were supposed to be the priests. Melchizedek comes from the line of Shem. Yes, Stephanie. And Melchizedek is found in the book of Genesis and in the book of Jasher. And so Melchizedek, it was in the times of Abraham. Interestingly, speaking of Melchizedek, you guys remember when we were reading about the covenant that the Most High did with Abraham right here on chapter 15, when the animal pieces that we just went through over and over and over, and how he had the dream and the Most High walked through it? Well, check this out. This happened in chapter 15. Right before chapter 15, guess what happens? Before this takes place, I'm going to go back. Look exactly what happens. Abraham and Melchizedek. Interesting. That is what connects the covenant with Abraham. But we'll talk about it next week, just to give you a sneak peek. Coincidence? I think not. This is all foreshadowing of Mashiach. So I just wanted to show you guys. And again, because he is the priest forever. And interestingly, again, the covenant that the Most High does with Abraham and the seed of Abraham, because it wasn't just Abraham, but his seed, has to do immediately after he gives the offering, the tithes to Melchizedek, the king of righteousness. Verse 7. Who in the days of his flesh, when he had offered up prayers and supplications with vehement cries and tears to him who was able to save him from death, and was heard because of his godly fear, though he was a son, yet he learned obedience. The son, right, learned obedience by the things which he suffered. So correlating precepts to that, how he could have, he did offer up prayers and supplications as a man. I have the whole precept here. I don't know if I want to read the whole thing. Let me see something. This is Matthew 26. I guess I'll read it. I'll just read through it. I think I meant to put 39, 53. But let me read. So I'll just read the whole thing. He went a little farther and fell on his face and prayed, saying, "Oh, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup," I don't know if that rings a bell right now, "let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." Then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping, and said Peter, "What? Could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray, lest you enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." Again, a second time he went away and prayed, saying, "Oh, my Father," and again, "if this cup cannot pass away from me unless I drink it, your will be done." Oof, I'm getting goosies just seeing the connections there. Verse 43, and he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. 44, so he left them, went away again, and prayed the third time, saying the same words. Then he came to his disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners." I don't know why I saw a connection with the third day right there. I don't know. But anyway, because they were sleeping and resting. Anyway, behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand. And while he was still speaking, behold, Judas, one of the 12, with a great multitude with swords and clubs, came from the chief priests and elders of the people. Now his betrayer had given them a sign, saying, "Whomever I kiss, he is the one, seize him." Immediately he went up to Messiah and said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. But Messiah said to him, "Friend, why have you come?" Then they came and laid hands on Messiah and took him. And suddenly one of those who were with Messiah stretched out his hand and drew his sword, struck the servant of the high priest. Interesting. I'm gonna focus right here. He stretched out his hand and drew his sword, struck the servant of the high priest, and cut off his ear. But Messiah said to him, "Put your sword in its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Or do you think that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he will provide me with more than 12 legions of angels?" So those are the verses that I wanted originally to put, 52, 53, I believe, and 39. Now, reading through the whole thing gave me more clear connections. Oops, what did I do here? Can you guys see my page? Not again.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, what is happening? Sorry. I thought I had a glitch again. I'm like, not again. Anyway, let me see what Jessica was writing here. She says something really cool I noticed reading the Gospels was that after Messiah was crucified and they cast lots for his garments, he had a tunic just like the priests in the tabernacle. Just another connection of him being our high priest. Wow. I mean, and she quoted John 19, verse 24, when the soldiers had crucified Yahshua, they took his garments and divided them into four parts. One part for each soldier, also his tunic, but the tunic was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. Interesting. And again, I'm going to go back to the basin over here, which is the cup. Let this cup pass from me. And I know that we already spoke about this, but I just want to bring in the visual of what that cup or basin represents in terms of the threshold covenant. And the cup being the one holding the blood, that is the one that you walk through in order to form that, to enter into that covenant. So just wanted to show that again. And he's saying, "Oh my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." Because he knew that in order for that to take place, he needed to suffer. And again, the correlation of this was, I know I'm going somewhere else with this, but it was just to point out how he had prayers and supplications with vehement cries and tears. And through it all, he learned obedience. And I have more correlating precepts. You can just note them. They're found in Mark 14:36 and Luke 22:41. And then we have Psalms 22, verse 1, which are another prophetic messianic psalm from David. My Allahim, or more like, Haya, Haya, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from helping me and from the words of my groaning? And again, very prophetic, because Messiah later quotes from that when he is being crucified, which further confirms that he was indeed the Messiah. We have where were we? Verse 8. Though he was a son and yet learned obedience by the things which he suffered. We have Philippians 2, verse 8. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even the death of the cross. And then we have verse 10. Again, I had already shown you that precept, but according to the order of Melchizedek, again, that is found in Psalms 110, verse 4, right here, just for your notes. And we can also see in Hebrews 2:10, for it was fitting for him, for whom are all things and by whom are all things, in bringing many sons to glory, to make the captain of their salvation perfect through his sufferings. So all for us, all to rescue us. We're not worthy. Verse 11, of whom we have much to say and hard to explain, since you have become dull of hearing. So we're going to talk a little bit about this, become dull of hearing. John 16, verse 12, I still have many things to say to you. That's Messiah speaking to the disciples, but you cannot bear them now. We know that throughout scriptures, he kept reiterating, I speak in parables, because the truth basically is not for everyone. Matthew 13, verse 5, some And again, this part of Matthew is the parable of the seed that fell in fertile, not in fertile ground, the one that fell with the wind, the one that fell with stony places, et cetera, right? And the one that had a good foundation. I'm just quoting verse 5 specifically because I believe that has to do when we receive a word, but our heart is not ready, like Messiah stated here, to bear them. So we eagerly receive the message, but then the immaturity, the even the stony areas within our own hearts cannot allow them to bear fruit. So that's why I quoted specifically this section from Matthew 13, verse 5. So some fell on stony places where they did not have much earth, and they immediately sprang up because they had no depth of the earth. And again, that is in regards to having dual of hearing. And this connects, for though by this time you ought to be teachers. And again, the author is writing to the church, stating this, like, by now you should have been like more than prepared to even teach the word. But then he says you need someone to teach you again the first principles of the oracles of the Most High, the first principles, the Torah, the basics, which is why he quotes so much from it. And he takes it back to the wilderness. He takes it back to Leviticus, to Exodus, to the prophetic messianic Psalms, through it all, because they needed to mature and go from milk, as it states right here on verse 13. It actually says it right here too. And you have come to need milk and not solid food. Verse 13, for everyone who partakes only of milk is unskilled in the word of righteousness, for he is a babe. But solid food belongs to those who are of full age, that is, those who by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil. So this is, well, here gives it, the NKJV gives it a perfect caption because it is speaking of spiritual maturity, connecting not having the basics down. So in essence, if you don't have your foundation in the Torah, the Tanakh, the Torah and the prophets, you are in milk, which is most of churchianity, sadly. And we're going to see some correlating precepts to that. 1 Corinthians 3, verses 1 through 3. And I, brethren, could not speak to you as to spiritual people, but as to carnal, as to babes in Messiah. I fed you with milk and not with solid food, for until now you were not able to receive it. And even now you are still not able, for you are still carnal minded, walking not in righteousness, right? For where there are envy, strife, and divisions among you, are you not carnal and behaving like mere men? 1 Peter 2, verse 2. As newborn babes, desire the pure milk of the word, that you may grow thereby. Ephesians 4:14, that we should no longer be children tossed to and fro and carried about with every wind of doctrine by the trickery of men in the cunning craftiness of deceitful plotting. And again, that has to do with not having the right foundation, not having the word inscribed in our hearts and acting accordingly. And in regards to Messiah, we know a prophecy in Isaiah 7, verse 15, that he would eat curds and honey he shall eat, that he may know to refuse the evil and choose good. And we know that honey is a representation of wisdom. Hebrews 5, verse 12, for though by this time you ought to be teachers, is what I just read. You need someone to teach you again the first principles of the oracles of the Most High, and you have come to need milk and not solid food. I don't know why I put that there again, but I guess I wouldn't forget to mention it. I also have, let me see what other precepts. I think that's it for this section. Actually, I have Philippians 1:9. Did I read that one? I don't think I put it. It's okay. I didn't put it. It's fine. All right. So let's continue. Any questions up to this point? Yes, this is going to tie in perfectly with the next chapter. Karina had said, we are to be like the angels, that we will become holy, not men, aka flesh and beast. Absolutely. Jessica did an excellent post on what we are to become. Yes, we are going to become basically the composition of New Jerusalem, the precious stones, light beings, which is what angels truly are, what we are to become. So I'm trying to see what else I missed from the chat that is important to mention. All right. I can't wait either, Jessica. All right. So Steph, can you read 6 already? I told you
Yes.
guys this chapter was gonna fly quicker. You can start.
Therefore, leaving the discussion of the elementary principles of Christ, let us go on to perfection, not laying again the foundation of repentance from dead works and of faith towards the Most High, of the doctrine of baptisms, of laying on of hands, of resurrection of the dead, and of eternal judgment. And this we will do if the Most High permits. For it is impossible for those who were once enlightened and have tasted the heavenly gift and have become partakers of the Ruach HaKodesh and have tasted the good word of the Most High and the powers of the age to come, if they fall away, to renew them again to repentance, since they crucify again for themselves the Son of the Elohim and put him to an open shame. For the earth which drinks in the rain that often comes upon it and bears herbs useful for those by whom it is cultivated, receives blessing from the Most High. But if it bears thorns and briars, it is rejected and near to being cursed, whose end is to be burned. But beloved, we are confident of better things concerning you. Yes, things that accompany salvation, though we speak in this manner. For the Most High is not unjust to forget your work and labor of love which you have shown toward his name, and that you have ministered to the saints and do minister. And we desire that each one of you show the same diligence to the full assurance of hope until the end, that you do not become sluggish, but imitate those who through faith and patience inherit the promises. For when the Most High made a promise to Abraham because he could swear by no one greater, he swore by himself, saying, surely blessing I will bless you, and multiplying I will multiply you. And so, after he had patiently endured, he obtained the promise. For men indeed swear by the greater, and an oath for confirmation is for them an end of all dispute. Thus Haya, determining to show more abundantly to the heirs of promise the immutability of his counsel, confirmed it by an oath, that by two immutable things in which it is impossible for the Most High to lie, we might have strong consolation, who have fled for refuge to lay hold of the hope set before us. This hope we have as an anchor of the soul, both sure and steadfast, which enters the presence behind the veil, where the forerunner has entered for us, even Yeshaya HaMashiach, having become high priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek.
Amen.
Amen.
Our priest forever. All right. So we again, every chapter connects with each other. Off the bat, right here is connecting with chapter 5. Therefore, again, another adverb, transitory word, leaving the discussion of the elementary principles of Messiah, let us go on to perfection, not laying again the foundation of repentance from dead works and of faith toward the Most High. And then he breaks it into the doctrine of baptisms, the laying of hands, of resurrection of the dead, and eternal judgment. So I'm going to bring in correlating precepts to those points that the author is stating here. So therefore, it's connecting with Hebrews 5. Oh, that's why I had it here. So what I had read is exactly what it was connecting with. For though by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you again the first principles of the oracles of the Most High. And you have come to need milk and not solid food. That is exactly what this was connecting with right here. Let us go. Leaving the discussion of the elementary principles, let us go on to perfection, because again, we are saved by grace. It's an unmerited favor that we did not deserve, right? We were justified. I like to say it how I heard it once, just as if I had ever done it, right? We were justified, made clean, given the ability now to start from scratch. Basically, that's what justification means. But now we are to be perfected. We have to undergo, once we are saved by his unmerited grace, undeserved grace, we are to be perfected through the sanctification of his word, which is his Torah. And again, let us go on to perfection. It's funny how that is in there, but people say, oh, there's no way we could be ever perfect, you know? But if you read the word, it literally tells you we are to go on to perfection. And again, not laying again the foundation of repentance from dead works and of faith toward the Most High. And then it breaks it down. So yes, the importance to not go on sinning when we know better. And Karina says, yes, we can be saved and still have no changes in us. Absolutely. We can't. There's no way that we can be saved and continue living a lawless life, basically. We know that we have extra grace at the beginning because we are learning, right? But it's like Jessica said, when we know better, we do better, basically, right? And we're gonna get into that because Hebrews 6 is very clear what happens down here when you fall away after knowing, having tested the truth, right? So correlating precepts again, Hebrews 9, verse 14, how much more shall the blood of Messiah, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to the Most High, cleanse your conscience from dead works to serve the living Elohim? And we also have John chapter 3, verses 25 through 26. Then there arose a dispute between some of John's disciples and the Jews about purification. And they came to John and said to him, Rabbi, he who was with you beyond the Jordan, to whom you have testified, behold, he is baptizing, and all are coming to him. Why am I mentioning here this Bible verse? Because here is talking about the doctrine of baptisms. And we know that even though John the Baptist was baptizing unto repentance, we see right here that Messiah himself, he is baptizing, and all are coming to him. So this is a ministry that he continued to do, and not only himself, but he appointed the disciples to go on and preach the gospel, baptizing everyone in the name of Mashiach. We also see for verse 2 in regards to the laying of the hands. Oh, actually, wait, there's another precept for baptism. Acts 19, 3 through 5. And he said to them, into what then were you baptized? So they said, into John's baptism. Then Paul said, John indeed baptized with a baptism of repentance, saying to the people that they should believe on him who would come after him, that is, on Messiah, Yahshua HaMashiach. When they heard this, they were baptized in the name of the Adon, Yahshua HaMashiach. So that was clear to me there. Then they were asking, he was asking, you were baptized into John's baptism, meaning they were baptized through John the Baptist. And so he ordains them then to get baptized, and now in the name of Yahshua HaMashiach. So that confirms what the author of Hebrews here is saying now to move forward on the doctrine of baptisms. And the next part is the laying of the hands. We see a correlating precept here, Acts 8, verse 17. There's a few, but I just put this one. Then they laid hands on them and they received the Ruach HaKodesh. So we see that throughout scriptures. We also see the resurrection of the dead. I believe more so the resurrection of the dead after Messiah was more of a connecting the resurrection of those that died with him, the first fruits, because I don't think there was any resurrecting of the dead after Messiah. Some people will say that Paul resurrected someone from, that fell from like the third, from really high up, right? But when you really read it in context, you see that he fell asleep, he fell, collapsed, and he put his ear on him, and he could hear that there was still breath in him, which indicates he passed out, but he never died. So just wanted to point that out. So in regards to then resurrection of the dead, we see Isaiah 26, verse 19, your dead shall live, together with my dead body they shall arise. And again, this is a prophetic statement of the second coming. Awake and sing, you who dwell in dust, for your dew is like the dew of herbs, and the earth shall cast out the dead. We also see it on Daniel 12, verse 2. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. Let's pray that that's not us. So, and again, that goes to not only the resurrection of the dead, but Daniel 12:2 with the eternal judgment. And so then we have verse 4, for it is impossible. This is the verse that I was making reference of, connecting with what I think it was Jess and Karina was saying. Verse 4, for it is impossible. And a lot of people will ask me about this precept, but to me it's very clear. It is impossible for those who were once enlightened. Enlightened means that you tested the truth. You knew the truth, right? Enlightened means you now know Torah. You have the basic instructions. You know what's up, right? So for it is impossible for those who were once enlightened and have tasted the heavenly gift and have become partakers of the Holy Spirit, because in order to become partakers of the Holy Spirit, you are keeping his covenant, and have tasted the good word of the Most High and the powers of the age to come. If they fall away, or it says here, or have fallen away, it's impossible, right, to renew them again to repentance, since they crucify again for themselves the Son of Elohim and put him to an open shame. Yikes. And I know a lot of people ask about this, but to me, this goes to, if you know better, you then do better. Yes, this put instant fear of the Most High. And I've always said, because there's people that say, oh my goodness, but we sin daily. I don't believe, I remember the first time we did this study, I had said it back then and I'm going to say it again. I do not believe that this applies to someone who is in milk, someone who is learning, someone who is trying to the best of their ability. I don't believe this applies to someone who doesn't fully grasp, for example, like the people in the new converts in the book of Acts, that they came and some of the forefathers were or the disciples were putting a yoke on their neck, saying that they had to undergo circumcision. And so Paul took it to the fathers of the church, which were James and Peter, and those apostles decided that they shouldn't have to be circumcised, but that they should basically, and I'm paraphrasing obviously, but do the things that apply to them the most within their pagan culture, which was eating things with blood in it, sexual morality, because they were like a very sexual, promiscuous pagan nation. And so they were to focus on those things first. And then what else does it say? And then it says that they would have to be brought every Shabbat to continue to learn on Moses. So let's say, for example, a person like that who just came in and doesn't fully know the letters of Moses, they're just coming in and they're just dealing with the immediate things, and then they fall short. I do believe there's still grace on people like that. That's why I wanted to give that example, because again, to me, this is clear that this is talking to someone who knows Torah, has walked in Torah, and knows, like you and I right now that are in this study, we know that we are in covenant with our Father. And then imagine that me, for example, understanding how he hates adultery, how he just detests that we go after other gods like Solomon did, that I go on and I start preaching another religion, let's say Muslims, or one of those things, right? And I go back into then watering down the gospel and into this hyper grace message, into this prosperity gospel, and completely disregard everything I learned about the Torah. I think, to me, that there wouldn't be forgiveness of sin because I know better. Like, do you understand what I'm saying? Like, I know it's like a hard pill to swallow with this chapter, but let me see what some of you are saying. Hold on. Yes, Karina, this definitely connects to not grieving the Ruach HaKodesh. And then that's the thing. Like it says here on verse 4, and have become partakers of the Ruach HaKodesh. When you are walking in covenant, you are a partaker of the Ruach HaKodesh, which is why it came down on Pentecost. So Eileen has a question. She's saying, so for example, people that believed Messiah and now don't believe in him. Yes. I believe they are sadly part of this group, because how is it that you, and I'm not just talking about anyone believing in Messiah, because anyone could potentially believe in Messiah and not really know who Messiah truly is, meaning they don't know the meat of the scriptures. There's truly no revelation. They're just going based on what other people are teaching them, right? I'm talking about those who have tasted the good word, like it says here, right? Had a foundation, knew all these connections with messianic prophecies, and then all of a sudden they're denying Messiah. I believe that more so that pertains to that type of people. And then Karina has another question. So this would apply to someone who knew Torah but then turns back to churchianity? I believe so. I wholeheartedly believe so. You're going back after traditions of men. It's basically going after other gods. That's adultery. So I do believe so. And again, a person who truly knew Torah, right? Not just from hearing. And then Jessica saying, I feel like that could be the unforgivable sin and blasphemy of the Ruach. Absolutely. That is it right there. Breaking commandment number 3. Yep. So Eileen, stop celebrating like a pagan holiday, right? A lot of people stop celebrating a pagan holiday just because other people tell them to. So I don't believe just anyone. It has to be someone that has a solid foundation in the word. You know better. Again, that applies. When you know better, you do better. There's a lot of people I've heard in my lifetime saying, oh, someone told me that Christmas was pagan and I didn't celebrate it, but now I realized that I was being religious, so I went back to celebrate it. I still believe that person has grace and time to repent, because of the fact that this is someone that grew up in churchianity still, and was making that, they were making that, I guess, decision based on what someone else was telling them, but not truly having a foundation. I don't know if is that, yes, that's a good example, like Jehovah's Witnesses. They truly don't have a foundation on Torah, yet they don't keep these holidays. So I believe that they don't have forgiveness of sins? I do believe that they still have forgiveness of sin. Am I more clear? I hope that makes sense. Now let's look at some correlating precepts in regards to that. So we were on verse, just so you guys can follow along. Verse 4. So let's read Ephesians 2, verse 8. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves, it is the gift of the Most High. And that's what I was talking about. Grace is a gift, an unmerited gift. We also have Galatians 3, verses 2 through 6. This only I want to learn from you. Did you receive the Spirit by the works of the law or by the hearing of faith? Are you so foolish, having begun in the Spirit? Are you now being made perfect by the flesh? Have you suffered so many things in vain, if indeed it was in vain? Therefore, he who supplies the Spirit to you and works miracles among you, does he do it by the works of the law or by the hearing of faith? Just as Abraham believed the Most High, like we said at the beginning, and it was accounted to him for righteousness. And again, we know, and I broke it down earlier, I'm not going to say that again. Genesis 26, 4 through 5, it's right here. And I will make your descendants multiply as the stars of heaven. I will give to your descendants all these lands. This is Abba speaking to Abraham. And in your seed, all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. So yes, he did believe, and it was counted to him as righteousness. However, because he believed, he also obeyed. So in regards to verse 6, there's Hebrews 10, verse 29. Of how much more worse punishment do you suppose will he be thought worthy who has trampled the Son of the Most High underfoot? And again, this is covenant language with the threshold covenant right here. Counted the blood of the covenant by which he was sanctified a common thing, and insulted the Spirit of grace. So all this, and not sure what all this is saying. You were saved by grace. You didn't deserve it. However, when you don't obey, you know you're saved. You grow in grace and in word, right? By his Spirit, by his Ruach. It wasn't through the law that you were saved, as Paul was right to say that. It wasn't through the works of the law that you were saved. It was actually through the hearing of faith that you were saved, right? However, when you don't do what you're supposed to do, when you don't obey, which is what Hebrews is saying here, having been once enlightened and having tested the heavenly gift, which is grace, and having become partakers of the Holy Spirit, and having tasted the good word of the Most High and the powers of the age to come. If they fall away, again, it's having all these things been taking place. That's the condition. The condition is that. And Hebrews, again, 10 verse 29 makes it very clear. What you end up doing is trampling the covenant that the Son made. And basically, you are annulling or insulting the Spirit of grace, which saved you by grace. It's literally doing this. Hold on, let me go back. All this is literally doing this, which is, if someone didn't want to partake of the covenant, they would step on the blood to show their disregard. In a nutshell, this is it. You are making a mockery of the covenant, knowing, and again, this is understanding and knowing that you have willingly entered in this covenant because you received this unmerited gift, this salvation. More clear now? Yes, Jessica. She's saying, I feel like it also goes back to gratitude. Are we thankful? Oh, hold on, I lost you. Are we thankful for what Abba has done for us in our salvation? Yes, absolutely. I don't know who Ron Wyatt is, Karina. And Stephanie saying, denying to eat of his flesh and drinking of his blood. Yes, which is exactly what happens in John 6:6. And we talked about it on Sunday. So in John 6, we see the disciples, not just the 12, many, the multitudes of disciples that were following Messiah, he was sharing to them about that he was the bread of life, right? And they were so confused, they kept asking. And then in that he says, if you want to be part of the kingdom of heaven, I'm paraphrasing, obviously, I'm not going to go back to there, but you can look it up. He states that they have to eat of his flesh and drink of his blood, which is what Stephanie just quoted there. And it says that after he said that, and specifically on verse 66 of chapter 6, it says, from that moment on, they walked with him no more. So, yeah. So you see, to me, those disciples that were walking with him and knew him, yes, 666, by the way, the number of man, which is the flesh, not wanting to be in covenant with the Most High, but do your own will, because it sounds too hard to surrender your flesh, right? So going back, what I was trying to say is that I believe that is a perfect example to this type of people right here who were once in line. And imagine this, you witnessed Messiah, you walked with him, you knew, you learned from him, he himself taught you, and then they walked back. I believe they fall in this category, that they don't have, again, repentance, and they will be put to open shame. I believe that's a really good example, Steph, by the way. Yeah, this is a good example of exactly 6:6 right here. Chapter 6, verse 6 connect with John 6:6. All the sixes. Coincidence? I think not. All right, let's continue. So verse 7. For the earth which drinks in the rain that often comes upon it and bears herbs useful for those by whom it is cultivated receives blessings from the Most High. Just one precept correlating to that, Psalm 65:10. You water its ridges abundantly, you settle its furrows, you make it soft with showers, you bless its growth. And then we have verse 8. But if it bears thorns and briars, it is rejected and near to being cursed, whose end is to be burned. And speaking of that, we have Isaiah 5, verse 6. I will lay it waste. It shall not be pruned or dug, but there shall come up briars and thorns. I will also command the clouds that they rain no rain on it. Then we have verse 9. But beloved, we are confident, and I want to believe that goes for you all as well that are connected in this live study tonight, and those that are watching later on, that you, beloved, it says, we are confident of better things concerning you, yes, things that accompany salvation, though we speak in this manner. So, they were basically saying, we are putting fear in you right now, right? We are speaking really hard things, just as Messiah spoke hard things to the disciples in John chapter 6. However, they're being confident that basically that they will not go back, right? And I'm believing that for all my sisters tonight as well. And verse 10 says, for the Most High is not unjust to forget your work and labor of love, which you have shown toward his name, in that you have ministered to the saints and do minister. And again, that goes to all of you. He is not unjust to forget your work and labor of love. And that reminds me, I think it was Stephanie who have quoted it before. I don't remember, but beautiful are those who preach the gospel. Beautiful are the feet of those who preach the gospel. I believe that's in Romans, and there's also a precept in Daniel that they will shine more brighter than the stars. Oh, it's in Isaiah, yes, and Romans, yes. And correlating precepts to, no, I don't have a correlating precept to that. And we desire that each one of you show the same diligence to the full assurance of hope until the end, that you do not become sluggish, but imitate, again, those who through faith and patience inherit the promises. And we're going to be covering next week. Is it next week? No, just kidding, not yet. In 2 more weeks, we'll be covering the fathers of the faith. But this is basically what they modeled for us. Faith plus works. So imitate those who through faith and patience inherit the promises. Correlating precepts to that one. Hebrews 10:36, for you have need of endurance, so that after you have done the will of the Most High, you may receive the promise. Clearly showing that it is after you have done the will of the Most High that you receive the promise. It's not before, but after you've done his will in complete surrenderance. Matthew 24, verse 13, but he who endures till the end shall be saved. It also stated in Revelation, I didn't add it in here. And verse 13. For when the Most High made a promise to Abraham, because he could swear by no one greater, he swore by himself, saying, surely blessing I will bless you, and multiplying I will multiply you. And so after he had patiently endured, he obtained the promise. So I love that it says that for when the Most High made a promise to Abraham, because he could swear by no one greater, this shows me that this was Messiah. Because no, sorry. This shows me that this was the Father, not Messiah, because the Father is the one who entered into covenant because he could swear by no one greater than himself. So he swore by himself. That's what I meant to say. I said that backwards. So we have correlating precepts here. Genesis 22, verse 16 through 17, and said, by myself I have sworn, says the Most High Higher, because you have done this thing and have not withheld your son, your only son. And we know that he's talking right after he almost sacrificed his son Isaac. Blessing I will bless you, and multiplying I will multiply your descendants as the stars of the heaven and as the sand which is on the seashore, and your descendants shall possess the gate of their enemies. And again, foreshadowing of himself with his own son, Mashiach. We also have Luke, 1:72 through 75. To perform the mercy promised to our fathers, and to remember his holy covenant, the oath which he swore to our father Abraham, to grant us that we, being delivered from the hand of our enemies, might serve him without fear, in holiness and righteousness before him all the days of our life. But it all goes back to keeping that covenant in complete surrenderance, in complete obedience, righteousness, and it says forever. That is forever. Verse 16 or 15, and so after he had patiently endured, he obtained the promise. It's speaking of Abraham. Obviously, Genesis 12, verse 4. So Abram departed as the Most High had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. So we see how long he had to endure. He was 100, I believe, when Isaac was born, right? Or was he past? Oh yeah, it's right here. He was 100. Genesis 21, verse 5. Now Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. So confirms how long he had to wait. He had patiently endured. He obtained the promise, which we should model after him. We should patiently endure for our promise. Verse 16, for men indeed swear by the greater, and an oath for confirmation is for them an end of all disputes. Exodus 22, 10 through 12. Speaking of dispute, that dispute is making reference to this commandment right here. If a man delivers to his neighbor a donkey, an ox, a sheep, or any animal to keep, and it dies, is hurt or driven away, no one seeing it, then an oath of the Most High shall be between them both, that he has not put his hand into his neighbor's goods. And the owner of it shall accept that, and he shall not make it good. But if in fact it is stolen from him, he shall make restitution to the owner of it. So this is what this verse is making reference of right here. The oath for confirmation is for them an end of all dispute. That's the dispute being referenced in the Torah. Verse 17, thus the Most High determining to show more abundantly to the heirs of promise the immutability of his counsel, confirmed it by an oath. And again, this oath, it's in we see it in Romans 8, verse 17. And if children, then heirs of the Most High, and joint heirs with Yahshua Mashiach, if indeed we suffer with him, that we may also be glorified together. As well as in Hebrews 11:9, by faith he dwelt in the land of promise, as in a foreign country, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. And this is the same promise that we now have through Mashiach. And verse 18, that by two immutable things in which it is impossible for the Most High to lie, we might have strong consolation, who have fled for refuge to lay hold of the hope set before us. We have Numbers 23:19. For the Most High is not a man that he should lie, nor a son of man that he should repent. This is Haya. Has he said, and will he not do? Or has he spoken, and will he not make it good? 1 Samuel 15, verse 29, and also the strength of Israel will not lie or relent. And we know that that's the strength of the Most High. For he is not a man that he should relent. As well as Titus 1, verse 2, in hope of eternal life, which the Most High, who cannot lie, promised before time began. And then lastly, we have the two last verses. We have some connections there, 19 and 20. This hope we have as an anchor of the soul, both sure and steadfast, and which enters the presence behind the veil, where the forerunner has entered for us, even Yahshua Mashiach, having become high priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. And the correlating precepts to that, we have Colossians 1:15. He is the image of the invisible Elohim, the firstborn over all creation. We spoke about this last week when we read about him being an imprint, an exact imprint of the Father. And then what is speaking about in regards to the veil, we find that in Leviticus 16, verses 2 and 15 specifically. And the Most High said to Moshe, tell Aaron your brother not to come at just any time into the holy place inside the veil, before the mercy seat which is on the ark, lest he die. For I will appear in the cloud above the mercy seat. Verse 15, then he shall kill the goat of the sin offering, which is for the people, bring its blood inside the veil, do with that blood as he did with the blood of the bull, and sprinkle it on the mercy seat and before the mercy seat. And in regards to that veil, Hebrews 9:3 and 7, we're going to read it in the following weeks. And behind the second veil, the part of the tabernacle which is called the holiest of all, but into the second part the high priest went alone once a year, not without blood, which he offered for himself and for the people's sins committed in ignorance, which that is what has been spoken of here on Leviticus 16. We know that Messiah now, becoming our high priest, he is actually the one who can enter in the presence behind the veil. But he is giving us, not only can he enter, but he is giving us the hope that we will enter it as well through him, because he atones for us. And more correlating precepts, John 14, verse 2, in my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you, which is spiritually speaking of us going behind that veil. Hebrews 4:14, we read it last week. We read it earlier today. Seeing then that we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Yahshua HaMashiach, let us hold fast our confession. Genesis 14:17 through 19, we have, and the king of Sodom went out to meet him at the valley of Shaveh, that is the king's valley, after his return from the defeat of Chedorlaomer and the kings who were with him. Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. Interesting, huh? Passover connection right there. He was the priest of the Most High. And he blessed him and said, blessed be Abram, the Elohim Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. And lastly, Psalms 110, once again, the Most High has sworn, and he will not relent. Speaking of Messiah, you are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. I did want to show something really quick. Sorry, hold on. These are the correlating precepts, but that's not what I wanted to show. There was one precept in chapter 4 that I wanted to read from Enoch. So chapter 4, I'm going to go right back to it just so you can see. And if you guys are, whoever is watching this later and is not aware of the book of Enoch, I personally believe is scriptures. If you read it, you see all the correlations throughout scriptures, and it points back to the Messiah. It's just such a beautiful book. But in regards to verse 13 specifically, I just want to make this connection. Neither is there any creature that is not manifest in his sight, but all things are naked and open unto the eyes of him with whom we have to do. And so this is obviously speaking of Messiah. And I want to show you guys how it is almost like verbatim in the book of Enoch. You find this in chapter 9, verse 5. I know it's really tiny, so maybe just bring it bigger in your screen. Thou hast made all things, and power over all things hast thou, and all things are naked and open in thy sight, and thou seest all things, and nothing can hide itself from thee. Do you see how that is literally verbatim taken from the book of Enoch? So I just wanted to show you that. And again, this is speaking of Messiah, and just to confirm that, let me show you right here. It says that on verse 4, let me see. Yes, I think it's verse 4. And they said to the Adon of the ages, yes, the Adon of Adons, the Elohim of Elohims, King of kings, and the Most High of the ages, the throne of thy glory unto all the generations of the ages, and thy name holy and glorious and blessed unto all the ages. This is literally speaking of Messiah. So I wanted to show that there. There's also another precept that I have an Enoch correlation. And this was in regards to Zechariah. Oh, it was right there. Zechariah 12, verse 3, but it's actually, I have it over here. Verse 3 specifically, this one. And in that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it. And this has to do with the threshold covenant. So I just wanted to show you that in Enoch as well. We find that in the book of Enoch in chapter 56, verses 6 and 7. Okay, here it is. By the way, this is the side-by-side different translations. So I'm just reading from this one, which is the, oh my goodness, I forgot, the one that we all have. If you guys can put me a reminder, because I forgot what it's called, but yeah, you guys know what I'm talking about. So verses 6 through 7, and they shall go up and tread underfoot the land of his elect ones. Yes, R.H. Charles. Thank you, Stephanie. This is that translation. Again, verse 6, and they shall go up and tread underfoot the land of his elect ones. And the land of his elect ones shall be before them a threshing floor and a highway. But the city of my righteous shall be a hindrance to their horses, and they shall begin to fight among themselves, and their right hand shall be strong against themselves, and a man shall not know his brother, nor a son his father or his mother, till there be no number of the corpses through their slaughter, and their punishment be not in vain. And this has to do obviously with the day of judgment coming into the New Jerusalem, but I just wanted to show how verbatim this is talking about the threshold covenant right here. And I believe that is all I have for this portion. Let me just, before I end the recording, let me make sure I'm not missing anything from here. I think I have put here Matthew 21. Yes, I did want to bring in this parable. So you guys remember when I was talking about the parable No, I don't recall speaking of this actually. But this had to do with, I did read the one precept. Let me see where it was. Just give me 1 second because I did want to point to something. Just give me 1 second. Let me see my Bible. Okay, so now I cannot find it. What was that in relation to? But I know I wanted to highlight something here because, yes, I see it now. It was the stone of offense. Yes, thank you, Stephanie. It was, this has to do with when he was talking about, obviously, I'm going to start from 42, where it says, have you never read in the scriptures, the stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone? This was the Most High's doing, and it's marvelous in our eyes. Clearly, a chief cornerstone is that little cornerstone of a door, which we know that he is the door. And so we see on 43, therefore I say to you, the kingdom of the Most High will be taken from you and given to a nation bearing the fruit of it. And whoever falls on this stone will be broken. But on whomever it falls, it will grind him to powder. And this correlates actually with what we just read with Zechariah 12 and with Enoch 56. And it goes right a full circle, right back to the threshold covenant and being able to enter into the promise of rest. And that concludes this section of tonight. Next week, we're going to go really into the Melchizedek priesthood and the new covenant. So I'm excited for that portion. So I hope everyone was able to learn something new today and that this was a blessing to you all. And we will see each other next week, hopefully at the same time, through the same channel. Much shalom.